preparing the mind before each sutta discussion like this is a wonderful gift we give ourselves. Oftentimes when people take the fourth precept, musavada, not to say anything that is false or slander or backbiting or using harsh speech or using idle chatter, we often forget that it is not just about speaking, or in this case, not to speak those types of words, but also it has everything to do with the listening portion of it. So it's a two-way street. So what are we doing when the conversation or the monologue or the speaking, the action of the situation of speaking going on, what are we doing with it? Specifically, what are we doing with the mind? What is happening in the mind? And that I say in connection to the suttas. In a minute, I will go over to the last portion of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta, this being the 7th week that we've been covering this wonderful, amazing, long, the longest sutta of the Pāli Canon. But I encourage you to consider that Lord Buddha mentioned how awakening can, one of the 5 ways to awaken is through listening. Not just hearing in a passive manner, but to listen with responsibility. See what's happening. Observe. Apply the satipatthana in that sense. To see what states of mind are coming in and out of existence. What is arising, what is ceasing. Similarly, Dhammanupassana, what is happening with all these different phenomena. Are there any hindrances, for example, or the 5 aggregates that's really pronounced, coming in and out of existence, as it were? Or is this portion of the sutta really moving me deeply? Or I don't particularly care so much about that portion of what's being said. Everything is about us. Please remember that. So that would be the listening portion, because every time we are exposing ourselves in the form of listening, being receptive, let us be vulnerable to the Dhamma, if we ever become vulnerable in regards to anything. Let us be open to the Dhamma. Because so many people, so many beings, in fact, attain the highest fruits of awakening, of this Dhamma and discipline, just by the mere fact of listening. Of course, the listening means, in this case, to be open, to observe, and to make room for understanding to take place. That is the panya portion. So please abstain from intellectually engaging, having these debates in your mind, picking up things, dropping other things, avoiding certain things, agreeing with certain things, rejecting others. All of this nonsense, put it aside, please. That's what Lord Buddha always encouraged his listeners to do. That's why he always encouraged them to take a moment and meditate in quiet, in stillness. Sometimes he would spend hours having the minds of the listeners to be prepared. So Let us approach it like that. As mentioned, this is the Dīgha Nikāya number 16, Mahā Parinibbāna Sutta, and this will be part 6, the final part of this wonderful sutta, and it is titled The Passing Away. For listeners or viewers for the first time, please do remember that the entire sutta I have translated, and it's uploaded in the PDF form on the website that I have, mindreleased.com, released past tense, and in the Pāli Suttas section. So today we will re-engage with this recounting of the story of the last days of what happened to Lord Buddha as he passed and prior to passing and even after the passing. Today we'll be going over that portion especially and see what ensued, what happened with, this is the right at the cusp, right at that point in time where it's beginning. The life of the sasana post Lord Buddha. And so many human elements we're going to see unfold. So without much further ado, let's jump in. So this will be section 35, the Blessed One's final teaching. Then the Blessed One spoke to the Venerable Ananda and said, "It may be, Ananda, that some among you have started thinking, the word of the teacher is now ended. We have nothing left, now that our master is no more. But Ananda, such a way of thinking should neither be entertained nor considered. For that which I have proclaimed and made known to you all as the Dhamma and the discipline, that itself shall be your master when I am gone." Dhamma and discipline. Discipline in this case, in Pali, the word is Dhamma and Vinaya, the discipline. Anyone who wants to be on the path of the Dhamma must be disciplining oneself. And we discipline ourselves by being on the path, capital P, Patipada. It's a training. Every one of us needs to be disciplined. For that reason, we cannot be studying the Dhamma without disciplining ourselves. Hence, we have the 5 precepts. At the very least, we need to have those. So this is not specifically talking about the Bhikkhus then. This is talking about everyone who wants to be practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And Lord Buddha is saying, do not look for any follower, any following me, that is, who's going to be the next in command, as it were. To this day, you have traditions of Buddhists who have created a lineage, a hierarchy in a sense, of who was the first master. Obviously Lord Buddha, if they're calling themselves Buddhists, so Lord Buddha would be the first. Then many traditions will use Venerable Mahā Kassapa. And you have different patriarchs and all things like that. That is missing the whole entire point of Dhamma and Vinaya. Many places we see Lord Buddha saying, "He who sees the Dhamma sees me," meaning the Buddha. "He who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma." The Dhamma is our teacher, ultimately, because Lord Buddha is the teacher simply for the fact that he is the embodiment of the Dhamma. So people were beginning to falter and really be shaking inside, afraid, panicking even, as to what's going to happen to them. Are they all going to be breaking apart and going back to living a home life, a layperson's life? Also, Ananda, although now the Bhikkhus have had the custom of addressing one another as avuso, friend, once I am gone, that needs to change. For the senior bhikkhus, Ananda may address the junior ones by their name, their family name, or as avuso or friend. But the novices and junior bhikkhus should address the senior bhikkhus as Bhante or Ayasma, Venerable Sir. So this is another thing which many people don't know. At the time of Lord Buddha, everyone was referring to each other as avuso. You see this in numerous suttas. And if you know the time factor of temporally as the suttas have progressed, let's say, you kind of can gauge as to what roughly what close enough time or year we're talking about in reference to Lord Buddha's Parinibbāna, because this is the night of his Parinibbāna, and this is when he's putting it in, making it official, where he's advising Ananda, from this point on, the moment I die, all bhikkhus, the seniority factor is going to kick in when we are using the title, how we address each other. And this to kind of, you can see the logic behind it. Again, just like we began in the earlier portions of the sutta, where Lord Buddha was trying to make sure that the bhikkhus, the sangha, was legitimate in its understanding by following the codes that were established for 45 years. But here, you also establish the proper hierarchy of knowing who is, to be respectful, rather. Because when you have a young junior novice monk addressing Mahatera, especially an Arahant, as avuso, that would be very disrespectful, and it might actually even influence those lay people who are surrounding them, the Sangha. And that might create situations where the lay people, will lose faith in the Sangha. That usually is the bottom line. Whenever we look at the Vinaya, when you look at the patterns of how these rules were constructed, Lord Buddha, again and again, every single portion of the detailed description as to what ensued, what happened, that Lord Buddha instituted this rule or law into the Vinaya, there's always a portion where Lord Buddha is there saying, how is this going to help the sasana? How is this going to help induce this stronger sense of faith within the laity towards the Dhamma and discipline? That's always there. Many people forget that or neglect that. So similarly, we can look at this, avuso. Now, of course, human beings, being human, have used this to their own detriment. And now it's become all about establishing territory. Like the first thing that bhikkhus do when they encounter, especially those that they're meeting each other for the first time, they always will say, well, who is your teacher and how long since you've had your upasampada, higher ordination? Instead of sometimes say, having a normal respectful greeting or talking about the Dhamma, usually that is how they want to establish like the pecking order, as it were. So, but that has nothing to do with Lord Buddha instituting this, in a sense, rule that comes from the ignorance of people, in my opinion. Further, Ananda, if it is desired, the Sangha may, when I am gone, abolish the lesser and minor training rules. The Patimokkha, which we have as bhikkhus, it's about 220 and 20, actually 227, but 7 are the ways to how we administer, let's say, sanctions and things like that. So they're not necessarily rules. We have 220. But a big portion of those, the majority, are considered lesser and minor rules. Now, this is Venerable Ananda does not go ahead and ask Lord Buddha, excuse me, Bhante, could you clarify what you mean by lesser or minor rules? He doesn't say that. And for this, he was chastised during the first council. by the other arahants who were codifying the canon. They said, well, what do you mean? What do you think Lord Buddha meant by the lesser and minor rules? And you had several different arahants, Mahatheras. They were sitting and they each had an opinion of, as arahants, to look at what is a minor rule. And because they saw that there are differences of opinion, they said, well, for the protection of the sasana, the dispensation of Lord Buddha, so it doesn't crumble fast, let us maintain all the rules and keep them intact. Let us follow all of them, because Lord Buddha did not clarify. Now, if you logically and just using common sense look at the Vinaya, you will see that so many of these rules, especially this day and age, don't necessarily help. You know, they're rather redundant, or they are out of place. You know, let's say how you, as a bhikkhu, needs to be taking care of the bowl, which used to be, and still is in some places, clay, made out of clay. So you have to be very careful in how you hold it and how you place it, especially if you're walking through a doorway. You can't just be holding the bowl in hand and using the other hand to open the door, let's say. So you have to place it away somewhere safe. But even that, so that there are so many rules about the robes, all these things. So unfortunately, many people again and again forget how practical and pragmatic Lord Buddha was. Many of these rules don't help the bringing forth of Nibbāna, but they protect. They protect us from kind of going sidetracked into becoming negligent, not having sati. So when we apply the satipatthana, even into how we place the bowl down and as we open the door and reach back down and pick it up, all these are opportunities also for sati to be established. So within those moments, that's when Nibbāna could occur, but thanks to the sati in the mind, not because of the rule. So there are these subtleties that were completely tossed, not by the first council arahants, but by the people who still blindly make the rule more important than the person, than the human being, than the human relational situation that's taking place. Because so many of these rules were amended even while the Lord Buddha was alive. That's another thing. All right, continuing on. In addition, Ananda, when I am gone, let the Brahmadanda, higher penalty, be imposed upon the Bhikkhu Channa. But Bhante, what is the higher penalty? The Bhikkhu Channa, Ananda, may say whatever he wants, but the Bhikkhus should neither interact nor converse with him, nor exhort, instruct, or admonish him whatsoever. So Channa was the charioteer who was with Siddhartha Gautama when he left Kapilavatthu, when he left the royal life. And he was the one who accompanied him to the edge of the forest or jungle, where he witnessed and he carried his jewelry and all that back to the palace. And he was the one who informed the king and everyone that Siddhartha Gautama has now become homeless, is a recluse now. So after some time had passed, Channa himself went and became, took ordination from Lord Buddha. But he never practiced. He always used to hold the status that, hey, I was there when Siddhartha Gautama was a kid. We grew up together. I was his charioteer. I have been there when none of you were there. So he would always hold that against everyone and that would be the excuse for him not, well, to stay stubborn, one, and for two, not to practice and not to take advice. So here, Lord Buddha gave him the higher penalty, which meant that he would now be at the end of the line in, even young, lower in status than a young little novice monk. But the worst part was that all the older bhikkhus that he knew and technically spent 45 years of his life around were now going to give him the silent treatment, as if he was a ghost, as if he didn't exist. That can torture a person, especially someone who is so conceited, like Channa was. And from other sources, we know that he did, in fact, he was so hurt by the fact that even though Lord Buddha was on his deathbed, the last, one of the last things he said, the instructions, was to basically punish him. So that hurt him so much. Instead of saying, well, send my best regards to Channa, tell him how much I love him as teachers. He didn't say any of those things. So he was so hurt by this. But then soon enough, and everywhere he went, nobody was giving him any attention. He was ignored. That really shook him to his roots. And he really did try, and he applied himself, and he did become an arahant. So Lord Buddha knew that that's the only medicine for him. So in absentia, in a sense, he became an arahant, in absentia of Lord Buddha, that is. Channa, Venerable Channa, became an arahant when Lord Buddha knew that that would be the medicine to heal him. Then the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus by saying, Bhikkhus, if any of you is in doubt, now this is where Lord Buddha is really giving a voice, the mic, out to all of the bhikkhus present, to say if they have any questions whatsoever. Bhikkhus, if any of you is in doubt or confused about anything pertaining to the Buddha, the Dhamma or the Sangha, the path or the training, then go ahead and question, bhikkhus, without any hesitation. Do not be given to regrets later on with the thought, while in the presence of the Master himself, given the opportunity to see and ask the teacher face to face, we missed such an opportunity by failing to ask him. So this is also for posterity. So later on, people don't come out and say, well, I'm sure if somebody was given an opportunity by the teacher, they might have asked some questions about some of his principles or teachings. This is, I also see that as a reason for Lord Buddha to be saying this. And let's see what the bhikkhus, how they react. But when this was said, the bhikkhus kept silent. And the Blessed One repeated this invitation to go ahead and ask for a second and a third time by encouraging them yet again. Bhikkhus, if any of you is in doubt or confused about anything pertaining to the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, the path or the practice, then go ahead and question, bhikkhus, without any hesitation. Do not be given to regrets later on with the thought. And he goes on. And for a second and a third time, the bhikkhus kept silent. Then the Blessed One said to them. So now Lord Buddha is, perhaps people are kind of shy. They're like, how dare I come forward and question the teacher, especially now? I mean, he's dying. I mean, what audacity should I have? Like, the gall to be saying this. So some people might have that as an explanation as to why the bhikkhus didn't say anything. So Lord Buddha, to address that as well, so he's covering all the loopholes. And he says, it may be, bhikkhus, that you are keeping silent out of respect for your teacher, not wanting to ask any questions. If that is the case, bhikkhus, then go ahead and convey any unresolved matters or questions you may have by telling a friend who could then announce it instead anonymously. So you can, it's defer in a sense to someone else to be saying it. So it will ricochet off of someone else and no one will know that it's coming from you, type of a thing. But the bhikkhus again kept silent. Then the Venerable Ananda spoke to the Blessed One by saying, "How wonderful it is, Bhante! How astonishingly marvelous indeed it is, Bhante! For I am confident that within this Sangha of bhikkhus, Bhante, there is not even a single bhikkhu who could be in doubt or perplexity about the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, the path, or the practice." This is what Lord Buddha says. You speak this out of confidence, Ananda, but the Tathagata knows it for a fact that among this Sangha of bhikkhus, there is not even a single bhikkhu who could ever be in doubt or perplexity about the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, the path, or the practice. For Ananda, among these 500 bhikkhus gathered here, even the lowest in attainment is a stream winner, safe and secure from downfall, assured and destined for full awakening. What a congregation of bhikkhus, of beings. The lowest among them in status is a Sotapanna. Many people wonder, and for some, it is just a status that is one that is, it's a lofty status, but it's something to be aspired to attain simply because of how rare it is. And because what we read in the suttas, etc., etc. It is all those things, but many of us don't understand that there is a transformation that happens within the person, which makes it lofty, which makes it superlative, supramundane. And that is to be realized by the person experiencing it, one of which, the experiences happens to be the incredible, unprecedented level of faith that arises in the heart of the person attaining it. Even the path stage, the Magga stage of Sotapatti. That itself makes the person be unshakable in their faith, in their trust in the Triple Gem. Sometimes I've seen people who either their teacher or they themselves claim that they have attained paths and fruits. And after some time, you see pictures of them with teachers from other faiths or different branches of spiritual training that has nothing to do with the original teachings of Lord Buddha. And they're at their feet, they're doing the Anjali, they're at their knees rather, and being so respectful, and they're saying, "Well, I found my teacher, I found my teacher." And then you look at what they had claimed, the various different levels of attainment earlier, and now this. That itself is already a loud piece of evidence that this person has no attainment whatsoever. If you recall from last week's section where Lord Buddha mentioned to Subhadda, who came asking as to whether there could be other Tathagatas or other awakened ones in other paths. Can anyone attain the paths and fruits while following another path? Ultimately, Lord Buddha's answer was absolutely not. So long as the person or the path does not have the Four Noble Truths, meaning the Noble Eightfold Path, and no one's practicing it. And if that's the case, you will not be able to even find the lowest of these stages attained. So that's another way to know if a person has attained any of these stages, including the Sotapatti. At that point, the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus one more time and said, "And now the time has come, bhikkhus. I urge you one last time. All conditioned things will vanish and disperse. So Be relentlessly diligent in your mindfulness, striving non-stop. These were the very last words of the Tathagata. Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Appamadena Sampadetha. Those were the words in Pali, spoken by Lord Buddha. Section 36. The Blessed One's final release. After saying these words, the Blessed One entered the first jhana, and successively, by emerging from the first jhana, he entered the second jhana. Emerging out from the second jhana, he entered the third jhana. Rising from the third jhana, he entered the fourth jhana. And emerging from the fourth jhana, he entered the sphere of infinite space. And from the attainment of the sphere of infinite space, he entered the sphere of infinite consciousness. And from the attainment of the sphere of infinite consciousness, he entered the sphere of nothingness, followed by him entering the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. And emerging out of the attainment of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, he attained to the cessation of perception and feeling. Meanwhile, the Venerable Ananda spoke to the Venerable Anuruddha, who was sitting close by saying, Venerable Anuruddha, the Blessed One has passed away. No, friend Ananda, this is Venerable Anuruddha saying, the Blessed One has not yet passed away. He has entered the state of the cessation of perception and feeling. Venerable Anuruddha had the Dibba Chakku, the divine eye, just like Lord Buddha. And he was able to see. He was tagging. He was just following the mind and seeing exactly where Lord Buddha was going in his attainments of one after the other of the jhanas. He was carefully following like a shadow. This is his teacher, his beloved teacher. Then the Blessed One, by emerging from the cessation of perception and feeling, entered the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. So he went all the way up to the ninth jhana. Ninth jhana, meaning the cessation of perception and feeling, is considered oftentimes as the ninth jhana. So now he is going backwards, coming out of that state, entered the sphere of neither perception, so he came out and entered the neither perception nor non-perception. Then he successively emerged from one and re-entered the lesser jhana. Thus, by coming out from the attainment of the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, he entered the sphere of nothingness. And emerging from that, he entered the sphere of infinite consciousness, followed by the sphere of infinite space. Then, by entering the fourth jhana, he emerged from it and entered the third jhana. Coming out from the third jhana, he entered the second jhana, and from there, he entered back to the first jhana. Then again, by rising from the first jhana, the Blessed One re-entered the second jhana. Emerging from it, he entered the third, followed by the fourth, and finally, by emerging from the fourth jhana, the Blessed One immediately attained to the full and final release of Parinibbāna. So Lord Buddha died as he was moving from the fourth jhana to the fifth. So he was going to go through that again. But that's the moment. And we know this thanks to Venerable Anuruddha. And he was also present in the first council, by the way. So he made sure this was going into the canon. The world's echo. When the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, simultaneously with his Parinibbāna, there came a tremendous earthquake, hair-raising and astounding, while thunders kept rolling across the skies. And when the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, Brahma Sahampati spoke the following verse in honor of the Blessed One. And by the way, for some of you who don't know, Brahma Sahampati is the reason why Lord Buddha taught the Dhamma. He was the one who said, Bhante, please open the gates of the deathless, because there are those in the universe with little dust in their eyes. And they will listen, they will hear you, they will attain, they will see the Dhamma, just like you. And Lord Buddha scanned the universe with his Buddha eye, and he saw that, yes, there are beings who are waiting, who are thirsty for the Dhamma. He himself is there now at the ending of Lord Buddha's life, and he's the one who's about to say these words. All must depart, all beings that have lived must shed their forms by laying down this body. Indeed, even a master such as he, the peerless being, the Tathagata, who has attained to unrivaled power, the Buddha Supreme, has now passed away, never to be reborn again. And when the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, Sakka, ruler of the Devas, spoke the following verse in honor of the Blessed One. Impermanent are all compounded things with their transient nature. They're all subject to appear and then disappear. Having come into existence, arisen from a cause, they vanish and are no more. Happy is the peace that comes when they forever cease. And when the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, the Venerable Anuruddha spoke the following verse in honor of the Blessed One. No more is there breathing in or out. For the one with unwavering heart, unshakable, with utter dedication to tranquility and peace, the graceful sage has now come to his end. Untouched by mortal feelings, his liberated heart, like a flame, now finds final release. Then, when the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, the Venerable Ananda spoke the following verse in honor of the Blessed One. Then there was terror, and the hairs all stood up, when he, the all-accomplished one, the Buddha, attained the final full release. And when the Blessed One had passed away by attaining to full and final release, some of the bhikkhus who were not yet freed from passion became deeply distraught. With grief-stricken hearts and with arms uplifted in despair, they began weeping, flinging themselves on the ground and rolling from side to side as they sobbed, exclaiming, "It was far too soon for the Blessed One to attain his final parinibbāna. It was way too soon for the Sugata to come to his parinibbāna. Too soon has the eye of the world vanished entirely from our sight." But other bhikkhus who were freed from passion, living mindfully with full and clear awareness, quietly dwelled while reflecting in this way. All things are conditioned, or else all things are conditioned, are also impermanent. Therefore, how could there be any other outcome than this? This statement was just spoken by those who have attained to, the sutta says, freed from passion. So they have viraga. So what typically that refers to is, at the very least, they are anagamis or arahants. So those are the bhikkhus who are saying, all things are conditioned. Sabbe sankhara anicchati. They're going to pass away. Then the Venerable Anuruddha addressed the bhikkhus by saying, enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament. For has not the Blessed One declared by teaching us from the very beginning that with all things and relationships that are near and dear to us, there is the inevitability of change, of separation, and of saying goodbye? After all, whatever that is born or comes into being is conditioned, and therefore subject to crumbling and decay. How can one then expect them to somehow not fall apart? For such a state of affairs can never come to be, as it is not the nature of things. Also, friends, you are distressing the devas by your behavior. So now Lord Buddha is no more to tell them what the devas are doing. But Venerable Anuruddha sees what Lord Buddha saw as far as the devas were concerned. So he's saying, you guys are unsettling devas. And the Venerable Ananda asked, but Venerable Sir, what classes of devas might the Venerable Anuruddha be aware of? Ananda, there are devas, both those in the sky and the ones who are connected to earth. They have their hair all disheveled as they are weeping and mourning, flailing their uplifted arms in tears, flinging themselves on the ground, rolling from side to side, sobbing with sorrowful cries. It was far too soon for the Blessed One to attain his final Parinibbāna. It was way too soon for the Sugata to come to his Parinibbāna. Too soon has the eye of the world vanished entirely from our sight. So these particular devas, looking at the bhikkhus, are finding legitimacy in them also freaking out, in a sense, flailing, in becoming so distressed, because they're saying, well, look at all these bhikkhus. They are students of the Noble One, and they are recluses. But they're also, so distraught and heartbroken. So it is okay for us to also manifest or exhibit these feelings that we're having. And Venerable Anuruddha continues, but those devas who are freed from passion, who are mindful and fully aware, are meanwhile reflecting in this manner. All things that are conditioned are also impermanent. Therefore, how could there be any other outcome than this? So this is, in other words, showing us that there are no differences between devas and humans when it comes to listening and practicing the Dhamma or reacting to situations, or responding, like the case is with those devas who have also reached a point where they have overcome passions. So bring them down to the human level. That's what Venerable Anuruddha just did. Afterwards, the Venerable Anuruddha and the Venerable Ananda together spent the rest of the night engaged in a discussion on the Dhamma. Then the Venerable Anuruddha spoke to the Venerable Ananda by saying, go now, friend Ananda, to Kushinara and announce the Mallas. The Blessed One, Vasetas, has now passed away. You may come at your own convenience. Vaseta is the name, the last name, if you will, of the Mallas, that group of people. And if you notice, Venerable Ananda is being referred to as friend. This because they were among the same group of individuals who came to take ordination, to ask for ordination, when Lord Buddha had just returned back from Kapilavatthu. In the group was Venerable Anuruddha, Venerable Ananda, Devadatta, Upali, Kimbila, and Nandi, I believe. And but this tells us the order. Who was ordained first? It doesn't say so in the sutta, but simply from the usage of avuso by Venerable Anuruddha to refer to Venerable Ananda tells us that Venerable Anuruddha was ordained first, and that's how the rule goes. Whoever, even if they were ordained a second or two before you, they are called Bhante, and you refer to them, you've referred to them as Bhante, and they could refer back to you as Avuso. So just something to know. And Venerable Ananda says, as you wish, Bhante. Later, when it was early morning, the Venerable Ananda, so this happened in the third watch of the night, right? So now it's early morning. When it was early morning, the Venerable Ananda put on his robes, and by taking his alms bowl and outer robe, he went with a companion into Kushinara. Now at that time, the Mallas had gathered in their city hall, conducting some public affair. And the Venerable Ananda approached their gathering and announced to them, the Blessed One, Vasetas, has now passed away. You may come at your own convenience. In hearing these words spoken by the Venerable Ananda, the elders of the Mallas, along with their sons, their wives, and their daughters-in-law, suddenly became deeply distraught. With grief-stricken hearts, some removed their turbans and began to dishevel their hair. with arms uplifted in despair, weeping, flinging themselves on the ground and rolling from side to side as they sobbed, exclaiming, it was far too soon for the Blessed One to attain his final Parinibbāna. It was way too soon for the Sugata to come to his Parinibbāna. Too soon has the eye of the world vanished entirely from our sight. Section 37. Paying homage to the Buddha's body. Then the Mallas of Kusinara gave orders to their men, announcing to them, Mallas, go now and gather all the fragrant oils and flower garlands that you can find within Kusinara, and bring along all its musicians. In those days, musicians were brought in. It's a very respectful, there's even dancing, but it's a specific type of festivity to honor the dead, to honor their memory, to celebrate their life, and where the living can actually celebrate the person through their activities and what that person meant for them. So they do so in this fashion. Again, as Lord Buddha might have said, all mad behavior. These are behavior for putujjanas. But people love festivities. People love pujas. People love doing all these things. And Lord Buddha did not just eliminate that. He kept, he's like, yeah, people are going to be crazy. They love this. So fine. You can't just cancel them out. Because there was at one point in the Sasana's history where people became very, very stringent. And meanwhile, you had the other influences of Brahmanism and all the other stuff that were going on in India that people have a natural tendency of following, that sooner or later it dissolved. The Sasana, the people became more interested in those pujas and all those ceremonies, that those just basically they converted back to Brahmanism. And in India, Buddhism disappeared eventually, because people have this weakness. To this day, you go to Sri Lanka and other places, in actually not just Sri Lanka, traditional Buddhist temples, you will see protective gods, devas, and deities, statues. Sometimes they're bigger than Lord Buddha's statue in the temple. So, and they're there, they say it's guardian, but technically it's to kind of appease them and to gain merits, actually favors from the devas. So there's entire pujas for the devas and the way they chant, things like that. So over centuries ago, the Bhikkhus in these different respective countries have said, well, we can either lose them or kind of squeeze this into the whole ritual in a sense, and keep them both and still get the benefit of getting the support from these dayakas, these supporters, and hopefully they might gain some merits. So you have that, which is adulterated, which is not clean, which does not have much to do with Lord Buddha's teachings. But hey, people love that kind of stuff, so they kept it. So the Mallas, having gathered and taken with them all the fragrant oils and flower garlands they could find within Kusinara, as well as bringing with them its musicians and 500 sets of clothing, they all went to the Sal tree forest, the Mallas' favorite recreation park, as they approached the Blessed One's body. Having approached thus, the Mallas then paid their respects to the body of the Blessed One with dance, song, music, flower garlands, and spreading of fragrant oils and incense. They then expressed their veneration by building canopies and pavilions around the Buddha's body, as they spent the day showing their respect in veneration to the body of the Blessed One. Then the Mallas of Kusinara thought, well now, Mallas, the day is too far spent for us to begin cremating the Blessed One's body. It would be more appropriate for us to commence the cremation tomorrow. So already they had spent a whole entire day just building canopies of, covering it with white cloth, and preparing the grounds and decorating, in a sense, the whole environment to make it very, very festive. And the whole day had passed, so they just postponed it till the next day. But each consecutive day, this kept happening, where on the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth day too, they continued paying homage to the Blessed One's body with dance, song, music, flower garlands, and spreading of fragrant oils and incense. They then expressed their veneration by building canopies, etc. They kept on building, so every day. And remember, you have all these people, and you have so many bhikkhus and other travelers, not just Buddhists, who are coming, and there also must be food. So you have to engage so many people to prepare food, and they couldn't go back to to Pava, for example, or to Kushinara to prepare food and then walk with the food. So now they were preparing all these kitchens and things to prepare food for everyone who was present. So it was a big, big event. But on the seventh day, the thought came to them, we have paid homage to the body of the Blessed One with dance, song, music, flower garlands, and fragrant oils, and have shown respect in veneration to the body of the Blessed One. Let us now carry the body of the Blessed One to the southern part of town, and there, outside of town, let us cremate the body of the Blessed One. So they have wrapped it in. Remember last week we were talking about the different 500 different layers of linen and wool and all the, the special way to wrap the body of Lord Buddha and placing it in this golden vessel that is also placed in sandalwood, oil. Was it sandalwood? No, I think sesame oil. And then, so you had all this prepared. So now they're saying, okay, let us move outside the city where we can cremate, because that's how normally it is done. You have to move it outside the city. Even to this day, if you go to, it has to be outside of the grounds. If it's a Buddhist temple, they do it not inside the actual Dhamma hall or anything like that. It's out in the open, obviously, because you will burn many pieces of logs and wood and things like that. So that's what they're planning to do. Then 8 strong men representing the royal Mallan families, having bathed from the top of their heads down, and by putting on never before worn fine clothes, approached with the thought. That's a traditional way of really cleansing yourself. We will lift up the body of the Blessed One and carry it. But try as they did, they could neither lift it nor even move it, because the devas were not allowing it. They were not going to have that happen. And we'll see. Then the Mallas spoke to the Venerable Anuruddha by asking, what is the cause, Venerable Anuruddha? What is the reason that these 8 strong men, representing the royal Mallan families, having bathed from the top of their heads down and by putting on never before worn fine clothes, approached with the thought, we will lift up the body of the Blessed One and carry it. But try as they do, they are neither able to lift it nor even move it. Vasetas, this is Venerable Anuruddha responding, your intention is one, but that of the devas is entirely another. Then what, Bhante, is the intention of the devas? Your intention, Vasetas, is this. We have paid homage to the body of the Blessed One with dance, song, music, flower garlands, and fragrant oils, and have shown respect and veneration to the body of the Blessed One. Let us carry the body of the Blessed One to the southern part of town, and there, outside of town, let us cremate the body of the Blessed One. But the purpose of the devas, Vasetas, is this. We too have paid homage to the body of the Blessed One with our divine dances, songs, music, flower garlands, and fragrances, and have shown respect and veneration to the body of the Blessed One. Let us now carry the body of the Blessed One to the northern part of the town. So instead of south, northern. And having carried it through the northern gate, let us then carry it eastward to the eastern part of town, and then having gone through the eastern once there, outside of town, then let us carry it to the Mallan shrine at Makuttabandhana, where we will cremate the body of the Blessed One. We will cremate. These are the Devas saying. And then in hearing this, the Mallas replied to the Venerable Anuruddha by saying, in that case, Bhante, let it be as the Devas wish it to be. Thereupon, the whole of Kusinara became covered by the raining down of celestial flowers. When the Devas heard that the human beings are just allowing them to do their plan, follow their plan, they were just jubilant. So they start raining down with celestial flowers, especially the Mandarava, blanketing the entire city as it became covered knee-deep in them. And Mandarava is a flower, like I think I mentioned last time. It only grows in the celestial realms. Thus, both Devas and humans gathered in Kusinara and paid homage to the Blessed One's body with dance, songs, music, flower garlands, and fragrances. Now, the human beings were carrying it, not the Devas, but the Devas were there, of course. But the Devas were jubilant because that was their plan, and the human beings are now joined up with them in executing that plan. So they do all that, and they carry the body of the Blessed One down to the shrine, the Mallan shrine at Makuttabandhana, and place it down there. Then the Mallas of Kusinara approached the Venerable Ananda and asked him the following question. What are the protocols in how we should conduct the procedure of venerating and honoring the body of the Tathagata as it relates to the cremation? Vasetas, you should follow the same protocols as you would while venerating and honoring the body of the wheel-turning universal monarch. This is what Lord Buddha had said, instructed Ananda when he was asking. So, and what is the protocol? And Venerable Ananda says about covering it with 500 pieces of linen cloth and 500 pieces made of cotton wool. Once this is done, then the body of the wheel-turning universal monarch is placed in a golden vessel filled with sesame oil, which is then placed inside another golden vessel, after which a funeral pyre is built, comprised of all kinds of sweet-scented wood, and so the body of the wheel-turning universal monarch is burned and cremated. Afterwards, a stupa mound is raised at a crossroads, built from bricks for the wheel-turning universal monarch. Thus, Vasetas, the same procedure is followed in relation to the body of the Tathagata, whereby a stupa mound is to be raised at a crossroads, built from bricks for the Tathagata also. And whoever shall visit the place with garlands or incense or sandal paste, or pay reverence with the calm serenity of the heart, that act itself will be for his lasting happiness and well-being for a very long time. Soon after hearing this, the Mallas gave orders to their men while instructing them. Go now, O Mallas, gather all the teased cotton wool you could find in Kusinara. Thus, with all the needed materials ready, the Mallas of Kusinara wrapped the Blessed One's body with new linen, and then with teased cotton wool, and so it was done up to 500 pieces of linen cloth and 500 pieces made of cotton wool. In some translations, I've seen them say that they wrapped it with 500 times the body of Lord Buddha with linen, 500 times with cotton wool. Well, that is unrealistic, because 500, it will really become, it's so big that it defies common sense. So it's not practical plus. So, but you can apply them, together, 500 pieces, and wrap it in a certain way where it's not like the whole entire thing is like 2 meters square, for example, and then that counts as 1 and 500 of those. So sometimes people go ahead and really, I think last week I said deifying, making this otherworldly event, especially, Lord Buddha, the body of Lord Buddha. So we have to take it with a grain of salt. Just like in the case of when we hear or read about 500 bhikkhus were approaching, Lord Buddha was, accompanied by 500. 500 was a big number. So it's not like somebody sat there and counted, tallied one after another, how many bhikkhus were coming in, of course. But it's a big number, and it basically is signifying that there was a large group of people there. So it might have been 500, it might have been far less, it might have been more. We don't care. So similarly, we have to take things with a grain of salt and not be so, literal in our understanding of the suttas. Section 38. The Venerable Mahā arrives. Now, at that time, the Venerable Mahā was walking from Pāva to Kusinara, which is about 5 miles. And remember, when Lord Buddha was alive and he was walking with Ananda, Venerable Ananda, from Pāva to Kusinara, even though it was 5 miles, he had to stop 25 times because his body was so weak, and he had to rest 25 times. So, but it's 5 miles. So Venerable Mahā is walking now towards Kusinara, along with a large sangha of, guess what, 500 bhikkhus. Feeling tired while on the way, the Venerable Mahā came off the main road and sat down at the foot of a tree. Then a certain Ajivaka came by. Ajivaka is, you can think of him as a naked ascetic, on his way to Pāva, and in his hand he was seen carrying a divine mandara flower taken from Kusinara. So he was holding for dear life to this mandara flower. And the Venerable Mahā, on seeing the Ajivaka coming from a distance, waited until he drew near, and then spoke to him by saying, "Friend," he knew what that flower meant, but he wanted to ask him loudly so the other bhikkhus could also hear. "Friend, have you any news about our teacher?" "Yes, friend. It has now been 7 days since the recluse Gautama passed away. It is due to that special occasion that I was able to get this divine mandara flower." On hearing the news, some bhikkhus, not yet freed from passion, began weeping with arms uplifted in despair, flinging themselves on the ground and rolling from side to side as they sobbed, exclaiming, it was far too soon for the Blessed One to attain his final parinibbāna. But other bhikkhus, I'm shortening it because it's repeating what we went over twice already above. But other bhikkhus who were freed from passion, living mindfully with full and clear awareness, quietly dwelled while reflecting in this manner. All things that are conditioned are also impermanent. Therefore, how could there be any other outcome than this? Meanwhile, a certain monk who was seated among them by the name of Subhadda, this is a different Subhadda than the one that we saw a few weeks last week, who came truly interested in learning, and he even became an arahant. This is different. By the name of Subhadda, who had recently gone forth from home life into homelessness, and only in his old age turned to the other bhikkhus and exclaimed, "Enough, friends, do not grieve. There is nothing to grieve. After all, we are now finally rid of that great recluse. For it has been too long, friends, that we have been oppressed by him, constantly chastising us and telling us, this is suitable for you, bhikkhus, that is not suitable for you, bhikkhus. But now, finally, we will be able to do whatever we want and not do whatever we do not want. As if anybody was forcing him to put on the robes. He could have left. So this is the epitome of laziness. Plus, this man had become a bhikkhu at his old age, having lived his whole life. So you would expect a person with at least that much experience, I'm presuming, of course, to have some understanding as to why the rules were placed there in the first place. But here we see very juvenile, a very careless and callous behavior, where he's even turning to the other bhikkhus who've been in robes for a far longer time than himself and trying to, comfort them, quote unquote. Then the Venerable Mahā Kassapa, witnessing what was taking place, addressed the bhikkhus by saying, "Enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament." Venerable Mahā Kassapa did not chastise him at any point. We see this. But that doesn't mean that he was not extremely wary of this, or aware of this, rather, situation and how grave of a circumstance this was presenting for the sasana. Because he already saw that the breaking of the sasana right there in his eye, in front of him. Just like this character, Subhadda, there were going to be countless other bhikkhus who were going to celebrate and or come up with their own theories of what Lord Buddha said or not say. So it had to be codified, the teachings. And the living embodiment of the teachings was Venerable Ananda. So they had to put it together. And in a sense, we can actually thank this character, Subhadda, the monk. So Venerable Mahā Kassapa says, "Enough, friends, do not grieve, do not lament. For has not the Blessed One declared by teaching us from the very beginning that with all things and relationships that are near and dear to us, there is the inevitability of change, of separation, and of saying goodbye. After all, whatever that is born or comes into being is conditioned, and therefore subject to crumbling and decay. How can one then expect them to somehow not fall apart? For such a state of affairs can never come to be, as it is not the nature of things." While this was taking place in Pava, in Kusinara, 4 men representing royal Mallan families, having bathed from the top of their heads down and by putting on never before worn fine clothes, said, we will now light the Blessed One's funeral pyre." So all 4 of them will hold the torch, and they will go together and they will light up the funeral pyre of Lord Buddha's. But try as they did, they could not do so, for it would refuse to catch fire. Then the Mallas spoke to the Venerable Anuruddha by asking, "What is the cause, Venerable Anuruddha? What is the reason that these 4 men representing royal Mallan families are unable to light the Blessed One's funeral pyre?" Vasithas, the reason is because the Devas have an entirely different intention than yours. Hence, they will not allow you to start the cremation. But what, Bhante, is the intention of the Devas? Asked the Mallas. The purpose of the Devas, Vasithas, is this. The Venerable Mahā Kassapa is on his way from Pava to Kusinara, together with a large Sangha of 500 bhikkhus. We shall not let the Blessed One's funeral pyre be set alight until the Venerable Mahā Kassapa also has paid homage at the feet of his master, the Blessed One. Hearing this, the Mallas replied to the Venerable Anuruddha by saying, "In that case, Bhante, may it be as the Devas wish it to be." Sometime later, the Venerable Mahā Kassapa reached Kusinara and directly approached the funeral pyre of the Blessed One, which had been placed at the Mallan shrine at Makutabandha. Arranging his upper robe on one shoulder, and with his clasped hands raised in salutation to his heart, the Venerable Mahā Kassapa walked 3 times, circling the pyre, keeping his right side towards the Blessed One's body as he paid homage one last time at the feet of his teacher, the Blessed One, as did his 500 bhikkhus. In some of the commentaries, we see how even though it was Lord Buddha's body was thickly covered, Venerable Mahākassapa could not see the body to pay his respect. So at that moment, the devas went through all those layers of linen and teased wool and opened up a portion of the shroud in which Lord Buddha was wrapped, the body of Lord Buddha was wrapped, and exposed his big toe, to which Venerable Mahākassapa paid his homage to Lord Buddha. And then, right at that moment, when the Venerable Mahākassapa and the 500 bhikkhus had paid their respects, the funeral pyre of the Blessed One burst into flames, suddenly, all on its own. The devas lit it up. It was not lit up by human beings. This is important to know. The entrance of Siddhartha Gautama into this world, out of his mother's womb, was first held by the devas. They were the ones who greeted the Bodhisattva, the baby, Siddhartha, into this world. And here we see also the devas helping the exit, if you will, from this world, the body to be cremated. It was done with the auspices of the devas themselves. Later, when the body of the Blessed One had been consumed by the fire, no ashes or soot were to be seen of what used to be his skin, tissues, flesh, sinews, or any fluids, except only for some bones that remain. Just as when ghee or fine oil is burnt, it leaves no soot or ashes behind. Even so, when the body of the Blessed One had been burned, no ashes or particles were to be seen of what used to be his skin, tissues, flesh, sinews, or any fluids, except only for some bones that remained. And of the 500 linen wrappings around the Blessed One's body, only 2 were not consumed, the innermost and the outermost. So everything else was consumed. Some arahants do display certain signs, if you will, from this very important event, which is their cremation. They will relieve relics. Sometimes there will be rainbows showing up. The sky will actually behave differently, unnaturally, for no reason, supposed no reason. So these have been reported. So in this case, we see an example. Now, this might have also been added by the commentators in times after the first council. But again, you may go ahead and take it with a grain of salt as well. And when the body of the Blessed One had been consumed, water rained down from the skies, extinguishing the funeral pyre of the Blessed One, while water was also released from the sal trees that came down, subduing the fires, as well as by the mullas of Kusinara, who brought with them water scented with many kinds of fragrances, as they all came to extinguish the pyre that consumed the body of the Blessed One. Then the mullas of Kusinara respectfully collected the relics of the Blessed One's body and brought them to their council hall, where they surrounded them with a lattice work of spears, encircled with a barrier made by their bows. They're warriors, so they're kattiyas, so they have all these weaponry. So they put it, because that's how it's a, you know, you would treat it as you would to a king, and Lord Buddha obviously belonged to the Kattiya family, meaning he was from the kingly royal family, so he is getting all the proper ceremonial treatment. And that is where the relics were kept for 7 days, as they paid homage to the relics of the Blessed One with dance, song, music, flower garlands, and fragrant oils and incense, while they showed their respect in veneration to the relics of the Blessed One. Section 39, distribution of the Blessed One's relics. Take some water. Then the ruler of Magadha, King Ajatasattu, son of Queen Vaidehi, came to know that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away, and he sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara saying, the Blessed One was of the Khattiya warrior caste, like me. Therefore, I deserve a portion of the relics of the Blessed One. I will build a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One and hold a royal festival in their honor, in their, as in relics honor. When the Lichavis of Vesali also heard that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away, they too sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara by saying, the Blessed One was of the Khattiya warrior caste like us. Therefore, we deserve a portion of the relics of the Blessed One. We will build a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One and hold a royal festival in their honor. And the Sakyas of Kapilavatthu heard, Sakya is the family of Lord Buddha's, Siddhartha Gautama's, heard that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away. And they also sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara saying, the Blessed One was the greatest of our sons. Therefore, we deserve a portion of the relics of the Blessed One. We will build a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One and hold a royal festival in their honor. Then the Bulas of Allakappa too learned that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away. And they sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara saying, the Blessed One was of the Khattiya warrior caste. So they're also saying he's a warrior caste, so are we, so we need a portion. We want a portion also, and we will build a stupa and hold a festival in their honor, excuse me. Then the Kolyans of Ramagama heard how at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away, and they too wanted a portion. And then the Brahmin Vetadipa came to learn that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away, and he sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara saying, the Blessed One was of the Khattiya warrior caste, and I am a Brahmin. And in the Lord of, the laws of Manu, you have the caste system, right? So the top caste is the Brahmin class, the religious caste. And those who know the mantras and the 3 Vedas, etc., of that time. And we had more Vedas, but so then the Khattiyas come after. So they were the protectors of the Brahmin. They arranged it like that. So they were the royal class, but the Brahmins would get the top. So he's saying he's a Brahmin and Lord Buddha is a warrior caste, so we're pretty close. Therefore, I too deserve a portion of the relics, he says, and I will build a stupa. Then the Mallas of Pava, same thing. They want a portion. Therefore, we deserve, they say this, we deserve a portion of the relics of the Blessed One. We will build a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One and hold a royal festival in their honor. However, in being confronted by these demands for their share of the Blessed One's relics, the Mallas of Kusinara addressed their assembly by declaring, the Blessed One has passed away in our district. We shall not part with any portion of the relics of the Blessed One. That's it. Belongs to us. But then the Brahmin Dona addressed the Mallan assembly as he tried reasoning with them. If I may have a word for you to hear, dear sirs, I beg you. Our Lord Buddha taught us all to be ever forbearing. Therefore, it would indeed be unseemly should there arise a squabble, along with war and bloodshed, over the custody of the Supreme Teacher's remains, who was the best of men. He knows, for example, King Ajatasattu is very passionate, shall we say. He starts wars just like he wants to go to war, if you remember from the beginning portion of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta, against the Lichavis. And the Lichavis themselves are barely able to control themselves. They're ready to go to war. So, and now you just gave them an opportunity because you're depriving these 2 parties from getting the relics. So he's like, please, let's avoid bloodshed over something as sacred as this. So let us all, dear sirs, be united in our agreement to divide the relics into 8 portions and share them as such. so that far and wide stupas may rise, and on witnessing them, mankind will gain faith and find the brightness of sight in the all-enlightened one. In listening to the Brahmin Dona's words, the Mallas exclaimed in agreement, "In that case, Brahmin, go ahead and divide the relics into 8 equal portions." When you go, if you get a chance to go to India, especially to Kusinara, there is obviously the place where it's known. That's where Lord Buddha died, between the 2 sala trees. It's somewhat on a slight mound, and it has so many different, it's a lovely area where you can sit and meditate. There's old remnants of kutis, so you have the base of the old kutis where monasteries were built. So that's where they have the special looking building, the white, and when you enter, it is about 6 meters long, the statue, reclining Buddha statue. That's where we get that. Replicas made of it, but that's where we find it. That's where Lord Buddha died. That is not the place where they cremated him. So you walk away from that, and it's not too far, but usually people take buses to go, but it's within the city of Kusinara. So you go there, and there is the actual mound where they had the cremation. So there is a beautiful stupa, and it has a lovely area, beautiful garden. You go and sit. There's a lot of mosquitoes, however. Make sure you get your mosquito net. But that is not the place where they divided. The Brahmin Dona divided the relics. For that, you can walk through a field, a beautiful area, and get to this area, platform, where they also have a special area where that took place, where the Mallas watched the Brahmin, because they were watching him. They weren't going to just let him go ahead, in that, while they step away. They were watching all their warriors to see how he was going to divide. And it had to be equal portions. So that is where this division happened. And you still can go to that site. Fortunately, Emperor Ashoka made a point of looking for, sending scouts, his own researchers, explorers, and found these places. And 300 years is not a bad, it's very fresh, basically. The traces are still there. So we owe it to him. So, and the Brahmin Dona said to the assembly of Mallas, "So be it, sirs." And he carefully divided the relics of the Blessed One into 8 equal portions. Once this was done, he again addressed the assembly by saying, "I ask, dear sirs, that this urn," which the container of the relics, "this urn which housed the relics of the Blessed Lord, be given to me. For over this urn I will build a stupa and hold a festival in its honor." I mean, there's no relics here. I mean, you're not going to do anything with it. May I please have that? And his request being granted, the Mallas gave the urn to the Brahmin Dona. Then the Mauryas of Pipalivana learned that at Kusinara the Blessed One had passed away. So they also sent a message to the Mallas of Kusinara, saying, "The Blessed One was of the Khattiya warrior caste, as we are. Therefore, we deserve a portion of the relics of the Blessed One. We will build a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One and hold a royal festival in their honor." But the Mallas replied by saying, "There are no more portions of the relics of the Blessed One left, for the Blessed One's relics have already been divided and distributed. However, if you would like, you may take from here the remaining embers and ashes from the Blessed One's pyre." And the Mauryas agreed. Look at the humility. They didn't say, "Well, you can't get the bones and we're going to get the ashes." So there's this, it shows this reverential treatment, this attitude that they had, because they agreed as they took the remaining embers along with the ashes from the Blessed One's pyre. Then the ruler of Magadha, King Ajatasattu, son of Queen Vedehi, built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at Rajagha, and held a royal festival in their honor. The Lichavis of Vesali, in receiving their portion of the relics, also built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at Vesali, and held a royal festival in their honor. The Sakyans of Kapilavatthu too built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at the Sakyan capital of Kapilavatthu, and held a royal festival in their honor. The Bullas of Allakappa also built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at Allakappa, and held a royal festival in their honor. The Kolians of Ramagama, having received their share of the relics, built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at Ramagama, and held a royal festival in the relics' honor. Then the Brahmin Vetadiva also built a stupa housing the relics of the Blessed One at Vetadipa, as he too held a festival in the relics' honor. Also, the Mallas of Pava erected a stupa housing the relics in Pava. The Mallas of Kusinara, in their turn, built a stupa to house the relics of the Blessed One at Kusinara, and held a festival in their honor. The Brahmin Dona, too, erected a stupa to house the urn where the relics had been kept for 7 days, and he also held a festival to honor it. And the Mauryas of Pipalivana, too, built a stupa at Pipalivana to house the embers and ashes collected from the Blessed One's funeral pyre, and they also held a royal festival in their honor. So it came about that there were 8 stupas built for the relics, a 9th for the urn, and a 10th to house the embers and ashes. And thus it was in the days of old. Interesting. You don't see any bhikkhus around the distribution of the relics. Very interesting indeed. What does that tell us? I keep speaking on pretty much every occasion about, especially recently, because I've seen how the Dhamma has been reduced to mere rites and rituals. And the very first thing that needs to be dropped when a person becomes a Sotapanna is Silabbata Paramasa. The rites and rituals, they don't go hand in hand. Lord Buddha scolded Venerable Ananda when Venerable Ananda was making a big deal about, well, Bhante, how should we handle the relics, the bones? That's none of your work, none of your concern. It's not your job. But today we have been promoting a culture of bhikkhu priests. The profession of priesthood has nothing to do with the life of a bhikkhu. Nothing. Nothing whatsoever. But that's what bhikkhus have become around the world. Everywhere you see this. But look at this whole entire section we just covered. The last portion, in fact, of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta, you don't see a single bhikkhu when supposedly this very important task is being taken care of. People are engaged in the distribution of the bones, the remains of Lord Buddha. But this is what the the people's interest has turned to in this day and age in the world, where every single temple has to have a container to house the relics. And you see here, there was only 8 portions. 1 urn and one group of ashes. How are these viharas getting filled up to the brim with relics? I have no clue. It's a big industry of fish bones. That's it. You do have authentic relics, but they are so very rare. I can relate here an experience I had when I was sitting, waiting to pay homage to a special container where a group of individuals, monks, had brought from Asia what was claimed to be from the original relics, from India, in fact. So it had been brought to Sri Lanka, so now it was being brought to on a tour, as it were, in the West, into the West. So I was sitting, it was in an auditorium type of a place, and I was sitting, and I was waiting, and it was before anyone had, before the relics, shall we say, were brought onto stage, and they had built a beautiful area with flowers and everything to pay reverence and venerate it. So I was sitting there. I wasn't too much, it's another relic type of a thing because I had already been to the Temple of the Tooth in Sri Lanka, and there I do firmly, I have witnessed, shall we say, instead of saying the word believe, I have witnessed its energy, and the presence of the authentic relic being there is undoubtedly the case. But I'm very cautious in just giving credence to things like this. So I was nevertheless there when I heard about this possibility of being in the same room as a relic from Lord Buddha's. And I'm sitting there to meditate, and I'm meditating, and suddenly I felt a very, very strong presence, shall we say, pass by me. And it was quite compelling enough where I felt I needed to open. In fact, my eyes just opened naturally, and I saw this venerable, this Bhikkhu, Mahātera, walking down the stairs, because it was in an incline, it was an auditorium. He was walking away from me with holding the urn, or the thing that was housing the relic. I was not anticipating anyone to be walking walk down the stairs and pass me by, because I was sitting in the aisle seat. I was probably anticipating it to be coming in from the backstage. So that was it was an interesting experience I had. So not to give you the impression that I'm minimizing, I'm not one of those secular Buddhist types, because you can't have both secular and Buddhist, there's an oxymoron. So just something I felt like sharing with you. But again, focus on the fact that there are no bhikkhus in this, in the execution of the distribution of Lord Buddha's relics. None. Because Lord Buddha gave a decree, if you will, to the bhikkhus to go ahead and do their task of attaining arahantship. That is what a bhikkhu should be involved in, period. And let the other stuff, distribution of relics, building temples and all that, be done with by the laity. Give them an opportunity to serve the sasana. Give them the opportunity to gain merits. That's okay. But teach them, keep the door open for samadhi and panya to happen with the strength of dana and sila, augmenting it. And this last portion of the sutta, before I conclude, is one that was added later on down the centuries from what we know by the Mahāteras in Sri Lanka. So now it has been, it is part of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta. And in it, you will see a portion of the verses mentioning it doesn't say the tooth, the relic of the tooth, but it does say one came to their country, and using their own terms. And let's conclude the sutta by reading this verse or verses. 8 portions there were, relics of the great teacher, the all-seeing one, the greatest of men. 7 in Jambudīpa are honored, and 1 went to Ramagama to be kept by the kings of the Nagas. Jambudipa is the name of India, by the way. Jambudipa. One tooth is honored in the Tavatimsa heaven by the devas of the 33, where Lord Sakka lives. Another is found in the realm of Kalinga. Yet another is guarded by a Naga king. There's a stupa in India. You go and it's guarded by a Naga king. Nobody is able to penetrate it. In fact, Emperor Ashoka made an imperial decree so that forever no king nor ruler will ever have or be granted the right to dig in the mound, which is now covered. There are trees growing on it. You can't tell that it's actually stupa because it looks like a hill covered in green grass. But you feel the energy. And it's guarded by a Naga king who's very, very possessive, very protective. And you will feel it if you approach it and you have the sensitivity to, even when trying to get into deep meditation, you will feel someone is trying to push you to get out of there. This is my place, get out. And that is the feeling that meditators do experience every time they go to venerate the relic. So that is also there in India. Through their brightness, this bountiful earth, with its most excellent gifts, is adorned. Thus, the relics of the all-seeing one are best honored by those who are worthy of honor, by devas, nagas, and noblest among men. Indeed, by the highest of mankind. Pay homage with clasped hands. For hard indeed it is, through hundreds of ages, to meet with an enlightened one, with 40 teeth altogether, along with head and body hairs received. Devas from across the universe rushed and carried them away, keeping them close to their hearts in veneration. Here ends the Mahā Parinibbāna Sutta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. A wonderful sutta. And it was well worth spending 7 weeks covering it, hasn't it? So I hope your faith grows deeper as you were present as we explored this sutta together. So before I end today's session, I would like to see if there are any questions pertinent. By the way, I have thought about, because we originally were thinking of doing the sutta explorations every other week, but seeing the encouragement that this is generating within you, the listener, and practitioners, to be able to go through the suttas, and the fact that time is always working against us, and there's so many suttas to cover, I found that it would be better if we do this every week. So I want to make that, unless something comes up and I'm unable to, for whatever reason, I get sick or whatever, but I want to make this happen every week. And I already have another sutta lined up for next week, and I will have it be posted on the website before the session next week. So this is going to be an ongoing weekly thing. Hopefully before I die, I'll be able to cover as many suttas as possible. I don't know if I'll be able to cover all of them, but and you'll be able to use this for your practice, towards your practice, which is the ultimate goal, obviously. So are there any questions before we close?
Bhante,
Yes.
Forgive me. There was a stupa in Caesarea in Vaishali.
Ah, yes.
And that's where they house the Buddha's arm, which is given to the Lechavis, but it wasn't in the sutra, or maybe I might have skipped it. I don't know. Just want to cross-check whether does it really exist, or it could be something that is made up.
That's a good question. It's Caesarea. It's in the domain of the Lichavis, Lichavi princes, and you have in other sections of the suttas, and in fact in the Vinaya also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, where you have this beautiful, highly charged situation where the Lichavis who were so close to Lord Buddha, it's really, really touching what happened there, because the moment they found out, the princes, that Lord Buddha was going to die, they refused to go back home. These are princes, they are householders, they have wives, they have children. They refused to go, they were in tears. They said, Bhante, we will not let you go. We will accompany you. Wherever you go, you decide. We don't care. We will leave our own kingdom, our principality. We will follow you. And Lord Buddha, actually, you see him like, go, just go. It's okay, go. They refuse to leave him, and they're in tears. Until Lord Buddha says, okay, I will give you my alms bowl is his bowl, which was made out of clay. So when you, unless it was housed in a special, a metal container where no human hands or any wind or erosion factor could take, some action, some type of effect could come because it's very fragile, especially when it's exposed to, if you place it in a vacuum, it's fine. So the casing of metal casing might serve as a vacuum. I mean, you discovered things from ancient Egypt and in Mesopotamia, things and all other places in South America. So you have things that have stayed from thousands of years ago intact, but they have been encased in something that is a protection. And they would normally put them in a metal casing. So as far as the credibility of that, I say yes, it is true. But as far as where the alms bowl might be, I once read someplace that it must have long been dissolved or crumbled into pieces, which makes sense. But these are things that we should not necessarily be so concerned about. I mean, an alms bowl versus the Buddha's own relics. You have in Thailand, for example, an entire industry of amulet wearing people, all the way from all classes of society, including the king, the royalty and everybody, generals, this and that, all the way down to the lowest of rungs of society. People just can't wait to be wearing amulets that contain some relic from some teacher, or at least blessed by some teacher. And you even have Thai forest monks, okay, who are considered themselves, or are considered by so many to be the most orthodox in keeping the precepts. They go ahead, even though they are monks in robes, they go and lay down and have somebody tattoo them charms and amulet type things on their own bodies. Now, this is not to, with the intention of trying to make you lose faith in these monastics, in these bhikkhus, but the behavior is not helpful, shall we say, for the sasana in any way. So the relic worshiping, it's part of the rites and ritual. But I use that example of the love and loyalty that the Lichavis had for Lord Buddha from day one. That came to that through, the high point of them being in tears. And they were sobbing. In fact, I think I mentioned this last week. As you're leaving the Kesariya stupa, you will see the tears, the trees, the tears, almost in tears. They have their tips, even though there's no wind, it's bending towards Kusinara. You will get on the bus from Kesariya to go to Kusinara, and you will look and you will see for miles trees that are like this. And that's when I was doing the pilgrimage, I felt the sadness, and I was like, wow, it's not just being generated from my own thoughts, etc., perceptions and sankharas, but just from what the atmosphere still holds. Like I mentioned about Lumbini, the birthplace, that is far more jubilant. These are facts, but you go ahead and be the judge by experiencing it yourselves. So they're there to inspire your practice. What might have moved the Lichavis to want to respect Lord Buddha so much? What could make them? Remember Ambalatika, the courtesan who said, I will be doing the dana ceremony tomorrow for the Bhikkhus and Lord Buddha. And they showed up and they said, no, Ambalatika, share, we'll buy it from you. This is the Lichavis. They were willing to give so much. And she said, no. Even if you give me your whole half of your principal, I won't exchange it for the dana. What would drive a person to have? It's not just a charm, but something moved them. Can you be moved by the Dhamma today? Enough so that you can have the urgency rise up in your heart to say, I'm not going to waste any more time. Any more time. Rites and rituals are simply wastage of time. Do just enough. You can do the Namo Tassa, you can chant some suttas, wonderful, to get the mind focused, to bring up saddha, wonderful, wonderful. Don't go overboard thinking that that is the way for saving yourself from dukkha, from samsara. It will never, ever, ever save anybody from samsara. Not in this life, not in any life. It's your practice. It's your mental cultivation, your samadhi that will do that for you. Yours will do that for you, not someone else's. That's why we can use the inspiring stories of the Lichavis, of Venerable Mahākassapa, like today we saw, and everyone else that we've encountered, to inculcate, to rise us up, to give that aditthana. When Lord Buddha says, have the aditthana, that energy, the diligence, the vigilance, to stand up and say, no, I have to do this for myself on a daily basis by bringing sati into everything you do. That's enough. Just bring sati, but maintain it, because soon enough that sati, so long as it's sammasati, it will turn into panya. And it will become very consistent. It will never, it's not going to be you holding the hand of sati anymore, but sati will always be tagging along everywhere you go. Everywhere. It will greet you in the morning when you wake up, the first thing. It will say, hi, instead of your worries. It will be sati saying hello. And without you being on your knees in front of a Buddha statue, you're already doing Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Sammasambuddhassa. Okay? I think it's been 2 hours or so. But I look forward in meeting you again next week. And for those of you who joined after I mentioned this earlier, we are doing a GoFundMe to find the Dhamma a home here in Armenia, and a place for me to have also my own place to live, and where I can actually see you students in person, where my goal is to have year-round retreats with students from around the world, not just students here in Armenia. So we're doing that GoFundMe, and you'll get the notifications, and we'll see if it happens. It happens. It will be wonderful for the sasana, and the Dhamma doesn't have to disappear so soon. We can fight it with every moment of sati. Let's close with that. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu lokasasanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu desanam. Akasatha chabumata devanaga mahiddhika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakhantu mam paranti. Sadhu. May you be well. May the Triple Gem bless you, protect you, and your loved ones. Till next time.